Hello, Frank Greene. How are you doing?
How are you, Sean, man? It's good to see you.
You too, man. Like the hat and
Good.
everything.
Yeah, this is it at the house.
Yes, it's really good to see you. Your family's doing well.
Yeah, I got my sister. She's been in and out of, dealing with this thing. So my mom and dad are both gone. So for me, it's a little easier because I don't have to worry about them. That's my family's good. Yeah.
All right. Well, Frank, tell us what you do, and then tell us about yourself. Maybe where you're from and how you grew up and what your childhood was like.
Man, I grew up in what was going to be the Silicon Valley. I grew up in San Jose, California, and I wasn't from a musical family, which I'm really jealous of. The people I see that are from musical families, I'm really super jealous. Um, but I grew up wanting to play music, and one moment, you okay? And it's just I grew up in a place that was basically going to become a tech area, and so I discovered that I love music, and there are a few music camps you can go to. So I went to a couple of music camps, but it wasn't really a big area for music. You just kind of find your own way. And so I was lucky enough in high school to be able to play. Do you know Dave Eshelman? He's
I know the name. Yeah.
he taught at Hayward for many years, and he was at San Jose State at the time. So he was nice enough to let me play in the college band when I was in high school. I played like ninth trumpet, but he let me be in that band. It was so great to be able to do that. And so the only thing I might is there was a trumpet player who, with a few other people, ran an Alum Rock. It's called Alum Rock, is a section of the Silicon Valley, and his name was Bill Nicolosi, and he became my trumpet teacher. But he also ran this regional band, and so we got a little bit of chances to play. But it wasn't like growing up in Eagle Rock or places like that, where like Louis Bonilla and those guys are from. Those dogs. Anyway, so it was a different kind of upbringing to a musical family, but I'm thankful because my dad was always very supportive. My mom was always very supportive of me, wanted to play music and play the trumpet. And so it was never really a fight. Stop practicing or it was go practice. It was a mutual love. From yourself. I'm sure you like to do it, so you just do it. Nobody has to make you do it.
Yeah. So tell us about maybe high school and college and.
Well, okay. So here's the funny thing. So my high school, I think, had six trumpet players, and I was the one of the six. And it's one of those things. If you practice at all, you're the best player. And so I decided to go straight from high school to North Texas State. Not, I think it's called UNT now, right?
Right.
Not realizing that it was going to be 245 trumpet players there auditioning for bands. So I went from six to 245, and so it was a shocking thing to see that many people that all play the same instrument as me. I didn't even think that was possible. And so it was an adjustment to have to get used to how you think about yourself, how you think about what you want to do, how not to get discouraged. And like I said to a lead player, I finally after a couple of semesters, maybe 3 semesters, I think I got to play lead in the 1 o'clock. And so a friend of mine um, a trumpet player here also in New York also played lead in the 1 o'clock, and he was complaining about something about school. And I said, yeah, the difference is you got a chance to play lead in the 1 o'clock, and so did I, but only one of us heard the N word associated with it when we were doing it. And he went,
Mm.
oh yeah, I forgot about that. It's like, well, just some, a bit of perspective is always good, right? So it was a different kind of thing living in Texas after growing up in California.
Yeah. Now, what were maybe some of your first professional opportunities?
Well, and Jay Saunders. Jay Saunders is a trumpet player that played lead trumpet with Stan Kent many years. Jay was in the area, and Jay just took me under his wing, and he let me play with him. So I got to play with Lou Rawls and the Four Tops and the Fifth Dimension, and I got to play with Gladys Knight. It was my mom's favorite, and so I got to play with people like that when I was still in college. I was basically able to make a living my last 2 years of college just playing music, and so I'm thankful to Jay and the guys in the Dallas area that took me under their wing and really let me, into their group so I could start to play before I got out of school.
Yeah. All right. And so let me ask you this. So why did you decide to be a musician? What in particular was it about music that was so attracting to you?
You know, when my sister was in the third grade, we got this thing called the song flute. Remember the song flute, the little recorders?
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
my sister got a black song flute. It had maybe eight holes on it. But I heard that and I went, that's what I love that. So I couldn't wait to get into the third grade so I can get a song flute. But they gave me an ivory colored song flute instead of a black colored song flute. But you know, as well as I do, it's like, you know, a red car is as good as a blue car, but for some reason you want the red car. So for me, it was like, you know how it is.
Right, right.
So, man, I got that thing and I think I must have played it a million hours a day. And I remember asking my teacher, I said, you know, when you lift up, you put all your fingers down, you lift up one in the middle, it changes to some other note that's not on our scale sheet. What is that? And the teacher said, oh, don't worry, you'll get to it later, you get to it later. And so we never really got to it. You know how it is. You never really get to it later, but later on you find out about, you know, harmonic series and things like that. And so, but you know, that was much later, but I just couldn't stop playing that song flute to the point where my mom was probably going to take it from me. And so I think that was my real awareness that that's really what I like to do. You know, I think when you talk to young people, they kind of always know. When people say they don't know what they want to do, I kind of call foul on that, because if you talk to people long enough, you know they know exactly what they want to do. You and I have talked about that. They know exactly what they want to do. They may not want to admit it, but you know, but they know. So that's how I knew. The trumpet came way later.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, that thing about knowing what you want to do. I think as we get older, we learn how to suppress, you know, our true self, so to speak, and sort of rationale maybe why certain things that we really want to do aren't, you know, realistic, or they aren't a good idea,
Yeah.
or we're afraid of sharing those with our parents or something, you know, because what if they, you know, aren't into it.
It's like what
But
if
yeah,
the killer, right? What if is like the biggest killer of dreams, right? What if, you know, to the negative? What if, you know, it goes bad, you know?
yeah, and yeah, I mean, you know, you know, everything, nothing is guaranteed. You have to be willing to take some kind of risk. To me, if you're going to take a risk, why not at least be for something that you actually want to do?
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So, um,
Just gonna move this thing real quick.
yeah, you know, I never, I never really felt like I had a choice. I mean, I always knew I had a choice, but um, music was always the only thing I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And fortunately, I had very supportive parents,
Yeah.
and so I never got to the point where I developed fear or something based on if they were going to be accepting of it or not.
Right.
And that's a huge blessing. So let's talk about some projects and things that you've been involved with. So,
Well, actually, I have a question for you.
sure.
When you was everyone supportive of you when you decided you want to play music? Because it seems like with most people I've talked to over the years, it's a mixed bag, right? Some people are into it. Like I had a high school band director. I had, you know, in the high school I had, since music wasn't such an important thing, we had 3 or 4 band directors the entire time I was in school. So, bless his heart, we'll call him Mr. K for now. When I told him I wanted to play music, he said, "Forget it, kid. Especially, you know, just forget it. It's too hard. You'll never make it." And sometimes I think maybe that's a good thing, because if you stop at that little bit of discouragement, you're going to really
Yeah.
struggle in the music business, right?
Right. Yeah, you know, I think, you know, honestly, by the time that maybe anyone, because I started when I was really young,
Yeah.
by the time anyone possibly could have said, hey, this isn't a good idea for you, I don't think I would have even heard the words they were saying,
Oh, okay.
you know?
Mhm.
And so I'm sure that there were people that had maybe negative opinions about what it was that I wanted to do,
Sure.
but either they didn't even waste their breath sharing it with me, or when they said it to me, it went in one ear and right out the other
Yeah,
ear.
right. Yeah,
You know,
right.
it didn't even compute, because it's
Right.
like, I know what you're saying isn't this over here, because that's already decided. I've already made that decision. So you can keep talking if you want, but
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing.
Well, this sounds kind of corny, but knowing you, the amount that I do, I feel like I forgot how they said this. They said, for some people, life happens to them,
Hmm.
and for other people, they happen to life, right? I feel like since I've known you, I feel like you're the second kind. You're like, I'm going to happen. You know, I'm going to do this, right? This is how it's going to be, and this is how I'm going to do it. So either get on board or move out of the way. I feel like that since the first day I met you. I felt like that. Even though you're a very nice person, I get that energy from you. Like, you know, you're going to happen to life, and so life needs to accept that or deal with the realities of, you know what I mean, of that.
Well, I mean, I think there's a positive and a negative to that. Um, I think uh, I think it's sometimes it's I think it's if you're an intense person and you're goal oriented and you're focused on a particular thing that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people can't handle that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, they just can't handle it. So they can't hang. They have to get away from you.
Yeah, more than
And
try to cut you down, they just move away. But that's good in some ways.
well,
Isn't
it's
enough of the people that support you?
well, it's good. It's good in that it sort of weeds people out, but the negative part about it is sometimes it's lonely, because
Well, yeah.
it's challenging to find people that are maybe that that intense about anything at all. There's a very small percentage of folks that are intense about a particular thing, and that intense about it.
But don't you think
Um,
that's maybe part of the price you pay? Because if you listen to almost any interview with a person that's have a level of success, I should maybe at this point say people look at success and they mean money. I don't mean money. To me, I look at success as you want to do something and then you did it. And so you want to, like, go down the street and get a gallon of milk, you come back, you're successful. I mean, you want to play
yeah.
with Ted Dameron, and you play with Ted Dameron, you're successful. It's not because for any amount of money you might make doing something and feel proud of yourself. What's the joke? If Bill Gates woke up and had Oprah Winfrey's money, he'd kill himself, right? So you learn quickly. I mean, I learned that years ago that success isn't really necessarily about money. Yes, if you can do certain things, you can make more money than other things, but maybe having a level of comfort is a success for you. Well, that's so. What I've discovered with successful people is they all say the same thing. There's a period of time, duration, who knows for sure, but there's a period of time in which loneliness is a substantial issue. I have friends that are classical soloists, and they talk about loneliness all the time. Tiger Woods talked about loneliness. After maybe not so much, but people like that. Michael Jordan. You look at chess champions; they all say the same thing during their period. Wynton Marsalis said it during their period of development. They kind of get a bit isolated into this idea that I need to get some momentum and grow. Loneliness becomes a word you hear all of them say, and so it's almost like loneliness becomes a rite of passage to get to a certain place of residence. I mean, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, I think it does. I I think some people, because of their personality type, may be uh, sort of less susceptible to that. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they still feel lonely, but like I'm an introvert,
Yeah.
and so I think spending a lot of time by myself, working on a lot of stuff, basically the unglamorous part or the non-glamorous part about being a musician all
Mm-hmm.
of the time by yourself. I thrive in that. That's actually
Okay.
something that I enjoy.
You and I are the same. As crazy as we can be around each other, for me, I'm not suffering all that much right now because my days usually look like this. I want to have time to do things I want to do. I want to be able to do things kind of on my own schedule. But then, like in the evening, as we do, we'll hang out. Like you and I hung out in London all day, and then we went to work. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there are times to do that, but fundamentally, you still need that alone time to get your stuff done, which I find is easier, like you said, by myself.
So speaking of London, of course I knew about you, and I think we were friends on Facebook, and I
Mhm.
had been following things that you've been doing, but I didn't meet you or uh, get to play with you until I started getting called to play with the Count Basie Orchestra.
Yeah.
And uh, for people that don't know, uh, Frank is one of the uh,
Don't
one of the
embarrass.
great lead players on earth.
That's available at this price range.
He is one of the great lead players on earth, very consistent. Um, uh, can scream. Doesn't have to blow his face off to get all of the notes all over the instrument. It's just such a pure, big sound and a great feel. I mean, all of the things that you want to hear out of a lead
My
player.
mom write you a check and say these things, and here you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can mail it later,
There you go.
and but make sure you put some sanitizer on the.
Oh yeah, I know that's the crazy part now, right? Can't touch anything.
Yeah. Um, so talk to us about some bands
We're
in.
going to talk about London. So what happened in London when we were hanging out at Ronnie Scott's, you mean?
Oh, sure.
It was
Yeah.
fun. It was fun to get to hang out with you because I've known who you are for many years, but sometimes you just don't get to meet people.
Yeah.
It's great having you in the Basie band. It's like a whole nother kind of sound. It's amazing because I've only been in the band for I guess not even quite 2 years now, but I've gotten used to the way it sounds. And then when I hear different people come in and out, you really hear the difference in energy and flow. And when you're there, the energy, not against anyone else, it's just a different energy, but the energy you bring in to me is very palpable. I can really feel it. It makes me a bit more pumped up. You can't see it because I'm behind you, but I'm a bit more pumped up when I see you there. It's like that energy you have helps radiate through the band. You probably don't notice it because you're in the front, but trust me, it's a cool thing having you there. I gotta admit.
Yes, and I'll write you a check, so we'll be
There you
exchanging checks there.
go. All right. Well, same $5 then.
Right, right. um, yeah. So talk about some bands that you've played in, and maybe
Ooh.
some experiences that you know were like really formative experiences, and you know.
It's I've been really lucky in many ways to get to play in many different kinds of musical situations. But when I was a kid, when I got to North Texas, there were so many musicians that you kind of had to. I mean, it's a little different now. I tell students a lot. I know it goes against what band directors say, but I tell students being well-rounded is a curse. And they look at me like, why would you say that? Like, every teacher I've had has said that to me, being well-rounded. I say to them because that's not how people buy. I mean, you don't buy a bread that's also a sanitizer. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe a bread can sop up a spill of. You don't buy bread to sop up a spill. You buy a paper towel for that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And a paper towel might be good for like using as a microphone filter, but you don't buy it for that. And
Right.
so I think the same happens with trumpet players and musicians in general. It's like I've never heard anyone say, "Hey, I'm looking for a guy that's well-rounded that can do all kinds of different stuff." Almost never heard anyone ask for that.
Huh.
When people ask me this, something, let's say, "Hey, I need a good jazz player, like a modern jazz player that can read," or I need a lead player that has like a double C, or I need a lead player that has that's classically trained. You know what I mean? But they'll typically. So I realized in college that people typically look for a lead trumpet player, a jazz trumpet player, or a classical trumpet player. And so I realized I better pick a lane because if I try to do all three at that time, I
Right.
was going to be. It's like that thing where it's like, you're not as good because you do all these three things. You're not as good as any one person who specializes in that one thing. And
Mm.
so there's this concept of find your lane and own your lane and then expand. Like when I work with my students, I tell it compress to expand. When you're going to be in a swimming pool and you're in the bottom, you want to get to the top. You compress to go to the top. You don't just lift up your body and you don't go anywhere. And so you have to compress, which to me means pick the thing you're going to do and try to get as much force and a forward motion towards doing that. Well, if you're well-rounded, that doesn't allow you to do that. That means you're spending a lot of time listening to Snooky Young, but also listening to Maurice Andre. If you listen to equal parts Snooky and Maurice Andre, then a person that just wants Snooky will know that thing better than you do because you've also spent time listening to Maurice Andre and Freddie Hubbard. You know what I mean? And so the problem is, especially early on, so I always tell students, find your lane first and then round out later. And
Mm.
so what happens, they realize people tend to buy in that way. So, they maybe it's different for alto players, but like if you're looking for a saxophone player, they'll say, I want a saxophone player that doubles, right? Or I want a tenor player that can also play bari. Or I want a tenor player that can play bassoon and English horn, right? They'll say, I want this that also, versus give me a person that does all. You almost never hear anyone buy that way. So the reason I'm saying
Mm.
that is that when I was in college, I really decided to focus on being a lead trumpet player. And so my goal was just to play lead trumpet with all the bands that I wanted to I loved listening to, and as many as I could play with for the leaders who were still alive or opportunities there were to play in those bands. I wanted to try to play in as many of them as I possibly could. That was my initial goal in college. And so I think through focusing that way, it really helped, because getting to play lead trumpet at the 1 o'clock, people heard me play, I played all my juries on piccolo trumpet. Because, it was the thing I was doing to round out, because I'm already playing lead in the 1 o'clock, so I don't have anything to prove that way anymore. See what I'm saying? So now I started to round out in college. But so fast forward, so I got into Woody Herman's band before I even graduated. So I got called to play with Woody's band. What do you know? The first thing I see is 3 or 4 of the songs have piccolo trumpet on them in the second trumpet book.
Huh.
Roger Ingram was playing lead trumpet, but piccolo is not really his thing. He's a great lead player, but piccolo is just not his thing, right? And so I'm glad I decided to kind of at least establish myself as being a lead player in college, and then add a few things on the side, because now I'm playing piccolo trumpet. So now I'm getting a double, right, for playing piccolo, and he's getting a double for playing lead. So now here I am, 21 years old, and I'm making the same money that the lead player is making. And it's my first gig out of college. It's only because of that idea. But if I had been a well-rounded player, I don't think I would have gotten called to play in Woody's band. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so band-wise, so I've been very fortunate. So, and I've gotten to play with Lou Rawls. You know Lou Rawls?
Yeah.
Rawls. Like I said, Gladys Knight, I've gotten to play. But big band-wise, after Woody's band, I got to play with 5.5 years playing lead trumpet with Maynard Ferguson. And I grew up listening to Maynard, but probably not what the people think that I did. When I first met Maynard, he said, after a couple of years actually on the band, he came over, he goes, "All right, kid, so how did you discover me?" Right? And I was like, "Whoa, dang, man, back off." And so I told him, I said, "You played a solo that was right before Hey Jude." We were playing Hey Jude in our that band with Bill Nicolosi. And, you couldn't put the needle exactly in the right spot, so you wound up hearing about 20 seconds of the tune before. And Maynard plays a valve trombone solo on a Kenny Wheeler tune. I call it Freewheeler.
Mm-hmm.
And that solo was so cool. And my band director wouldn't play it every time. I was like, man, so I went and bought the record, not to hear Hey Jude, because I really wasn't into that when I was younger. And so I wanted to hear that. I must have listened to that valve trombone solo. And so I started playing it for him on the trumpet. And he went, You're like the most unusual lead player I've ever had, because no one has ever said that to me, much less could play that solo. There's some high note thing, or maybe it's like Danny Boy or Maynard Ferguson or something that really gets them to be interested. But for me, it was how great he sounded on the valve trombone with that really cool groove going on behind him. And so I realized that maybe I'm a little different, maybe, than a lot of other lead players that I've encountered, because we tend to like different kinds of things as far as, I still love Snooki and Johnny Audino and people like that. But so, then later on playing lead trumpet with Frank Foster and playing lead trumpet with Frank West's Nonette. I got to play with, I've gotten to play with Rob McConnell a few times before he passed. I got to play with, I've done several records with Bob Minster's band. I pretty much recorded with everyone that I'm trying to tell you, but getting to play with Roy Hargrove, his big band, when he decided to have a big band. I met Roy for the first time when I was playing in the Dizzy Gillespie, playing lead trumpet in the Dizzy Gillespie Alumni Orchestra. And that was a crazy band. My first gig there with John Faddis was the leader, and Dennis McCraw was playing drums. And let me shut this off real quick. And the trumpet section was Randy Brecker, me, Greg Gisbert, and Claudio Roditi. Slide Hampton was playing lead trombone. Frank West was playing lead alto, and Antonio Hart was playing second alto. It was Jimmy Heath. I also played in Jimmy Heath's big band for many years, lead trumpet. Jimmy Heath was playing tenor, and James Moody was playing tenor, and Gary Simoleon was playing Barry. That was it, and Benny Greene was playing. It was a sick. John Lee was playing. It was a crazy band, and so
goodness gracious,
it's like, so I'm so thankful to have a chance to play, and spend time, with those kind of guys. I mean, I got to playing with Roy Hargrove and Claudio, and hanging out with those guys all those years. I'm thankful for those times, to be able to spend with those cats. They were great dudes, right?
Yeah. So,
bands, but I don't want to bore you with this.
I'm sure that nobody is bored.
And then I
listening to you talk about that.
Okay, wake up! I'm done.
Incredible list of musicians. that you've played with and been the lead player and
Oh, sorry, and Christian McBride. Christian, sorry, don't get mad at me. Because we went to the White House with Christian, so I owe him forever. So anyway, but.
All right, and so if you had to sort of narrow things down to maybe a really amazing moment, a touching a moment, and maybe I mean, I don't know, maybe it wasn't a music moment per se, but it was something that was critical and sort of providing a certain opportunity or just a particular direction that maybe you didn't have prior.
Whew, man, you know how that is. There's how many of those do we have in our lives? About 50, right?
Yeah.
I think you can't. I think you can't play with the people that we've played with and travel to the places that we've gotten to travel to.
Mm-hmm.
And meet the kinds of people that we got to meet without a lot of pivotal moments like that. It's. I think that man, it's really hard to name. I think sometimes one pivotal moment is what creates the other pivotal moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't. What's the genesis of the pivotal moments, man? I don't know if I could say that, but I think maybe when I got to North Texas and I didn't get in any of the bands, and I thought maybe at least I'd admit there were 9 big bands plus 3. There were like 13 or 14 big bands at the time, right? So I thought I should be good enough to get in, even like in the worst band on like 4th trumpet, right? And so I was really upset. And my dad, you never really met my father, but he's a military guy. I'm from a military family. You should know that because I was born at Fort Meade. It was that's right where there's an organization that's at Fort Meade that my father was in that I didn't find out until years later. But and so he's a military father. So I remember I called him up on the phone. I said, I think maybe I came here too soon. Maybe I should have gone to a JC for a year or two and then ramped up. Like a lot of guys were there after their 4-year degree in North Texas. I didn't know that at the time. Here I am competing at 19 years old. Here I'm competing with guys that are grad students for me, and so, you just look at everyone as just people. So you look at them as, hey, this is what the competition is going to be like. I can't say, well, I wanted to play in the Basie band, but that guy was 6 years older than me. It doesn't matter later. So, so I remember calling my dad. I was really depressed. And, because to me, I'm going to be here for a semester or maybe 2 and not do anything, so I'm just wasting a year in my mind. So called him on the phone. I said, maybe I should have gone to a JC, but I think maybe I should just come home. And he says, okay, you can come home. But when you get here, we'll make sure that mom has a fresh diaper and a hot bottle of milk on the stove for you. And man, that fixed that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, coming home, like a lot of people, like young people live with their parents. For my family, not an option. They actually probably blew up my room the second I walked out of the house.
Oh, it was already immediately converted to something else.
Said, get out.
Wow.
Yeah, it's harsh, but I'm thankful for, it's pivotal. I'm harsh, it's harsh, but it felt harsh at the time, but now I see why he did it,
Yeah. So, okay. So you've talked about different players that you've played with and bands and things. In your approach to lead playing in particular, what players were maybe most influential? And maybe you can go back and, well, when I was first starting playing, it was this person, or and then when I got to college, it was this other person, or something like that, or a group of people, or whatever.
If I tell you that's my hidden secret. I will say this. I think it's that's a tough one because it's like, which is better, Pepper Jack or Colby. It's like, they're both good. You know what I mean? And so it depends on what you're looking for. Like oftentimes students will say, hey, teach me to play a high F, right? And I'll say, well, what context do you want to be able to play a high F? And they look at me like, what? Isn't it just a high F? It's like, well, not necessarily, because the way you're going to approach playing that note, if you're playing in a brass quintet, right? Or you're going to play it on piccolo trumpet, will be quite different than if you're going to play it on Maynard's band or Kenton's band. But if you're going to play a high F on Minster's band, again, same note, but quite different approach, right? And so I can see already they're not used to thinking about things that way. And so that's when they realize that, when I hear a guy playing lead trumpet, they're not just hitting a bunch of high notes. There's some thought behind it. Maybe that's why this person plays with this band, but also can play with that band. Also does Broadway, but also occasionally does these things, and maybe a session or something like that. So when they start to realize that there's some diversity to it, it's not really just necessarily big band lead players that I would listen to.
Mm.
And so, like, Rolf Schmedvig is one of my favorite players, but he plays first trumpet in the Empire Brass Quintet. Rolf passed away a few years ago, but Rolf's one of my favorites. But I wouldn't say to listen to him as a lead player. I'd say listen to Rolf for how he moves his air and listen to his sound and the way his attack goes, because you can utilize some of that when you play in a big band. But if you only listen to big band players, you're going to miss that whole thing. So, I could say that I love Snooky Young, because who doesn't love Snooky Young? It's like, and who doesn't love Santa Claus at Christmas time? I mean, it's like, you kind of have to love Snooki. He's so great, right? It's like, you can't. He's undeniable, So I
Right.
think he's always the most pivotal lead player I think you can choose. But there's so many guys I like. Come on. Like I said, if you listen to Johnny Audino with the Terry Gibbs band, I mean, yikes, he sounds incredible. You know what I mean? So it's a tough one. Like when you listen to Snooky play with Thad Jones versus Snooky playing with a bassy band, it's different, right? A different kind of animal. So, it's like I said, it's kind of like choosing your favorite cheese. It's a tough one.
Yeah, cheese is good. Pretty much any kind of cheese. It's hard to
Pretty much.
pick a bad cheese. Yeah. um,
Some good cheese.
yeah, and I went to the grocery store, um, and we usually get a certain kind of cheese, and most of that cheese was gone, or it was all gone, and so I just grabbed another bag of cheese and went home because it was cheese,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's still good.
We're good. Yeah.
It's still cheese.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because I know Chet. I like Chet Ferretti, but a lot of young players don't know who Chet Ferretti is. It's like I don't blame them, because there's not that much big band playing.
Yeah.
I was at North Texas during one of the what are they called, the scholarships, the national trumpet competition.
Mm.
And I asked one of the players, I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I basically want to do the gigs that you're doing. And I borrowed that line from Charlton Heston. I said, well, if you want my gigs, I can tell you right now, from my cold, dead hand, will I give you the work that I'm doing? Because I've had to put a lot of effort into, when you talk about, like, people say, how do you get certain types of gigs, right? And I say, well, you don't necessarily try to get a gig per se, right? Sometimes. I think sometimes your effort should be to try to radiate as much energy for the thing that you want to do. And if you do that, certain gigs, like, you create your own orbit of sorts. And so when you walk by certain opportunities, it's drawn to you in a way.
Mm.
So when I tell kids, like for you, same thing. It's like, when's the last time you had to, like, formally audition for something? All those bands I mentioned, I never had to audition for one of them. They just call you because they want you. Well, how do they know they want you? Because you've been kind of trying to radiate a certain energy for a while. And so I think that's kind of what they pick up on. So a person says, hey, I heard you have this energy with Theo Croker. Hey, can you come have the energy with my band over here? And you say, sure. And so you try to bring your consistent amount of energy to each situation you're in. And so what happens is you walk by Frank Foster and he senses that energy, and now he wants it over there, versus you're going after this gig or that gig or that gig. I think it's a mistake that a lot of people make. They forget the best thing to do is be true with the music you like and what energy you like to send out, and just be true to that and put that out. And it's pretty amazing. People tend to come around to that faster and you don't have to do any dirty tricks that way. So many guys are prone to dirty tricks, and you don't have to do it. I might maybe a bit naive on purpose, but I've seen that to be true even now. I think if you put energy you put out there, as long as it's consistent and it's pure and it's honest from what you want, you're not trying to do any malarkey. Things tend to find you.
Yeah, from being around you and hanging out and playing in the band, playing in the bassy band with you, you're a very you're a positive kind of guy. I mean, you're always laughing. You're always, remembering a particular story, or talking about a particular thing. But you're also very, you, you're you're very serious with respect to uh, your particular approach, your particular um, idea, philosophy about how how things should be, and I think it's in a positive way, right?
I hope so.
I remember, yeah, I remember having. I mean, we were in London, and we were in what was the park we were in?
We were in Hyde Park.
That's right. That
That
was
was a
Hyde.
group. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we sat down on that bench and we were talking about.
Hmm.
I mean, it was pretty deep stuff that we were talking about, and I always appreciate being able to have those kinds of conversations where you skip the BS. You skip the small talk. That's over.
Had a
Now
chit
let's
chat.
have some real conversation.
Yep, yep.
And so I really appreciate that. So I'm gonna ask you this question about practicing.
Hmm.
Now, in my life, the older the older I get, and the more responsibility I have, necessarily the less time I have to practice.
Especially
Now,
you have way more than a lot of people do, so I can only imagine.
and when I was in college, and that's when I had the most time to practice. I didn't have any bills.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
right.
I wasn't married.
Yeah.
I didn't have the administrative responsibilities, and all of that, and things just get more involved, and they ought to. If you're doing a good job, then what tends to happen is you have more opportunities, and more people depend on you, more people trust you, and so I take that as a positive sign. But the negative sort of consequence is that I don't have as much time to practice, and in particular, um, I don't have as much energy.
Right.
We always talk about time, but rarely do you hear people talk about the importance of energy. Because you could have the time, but if you don't have any energy, that time is not going to be profitable. It's
Yeah.
not going to be
Yeah.
used well.
Totally agree. Yep.
But my question for you is, what do you practice? And how are you able to maintain consistent practicing? Um, say, I mean, and you can give some different scenarios, but we were on that tour with the Basie band, um, and gigs were like close together,
Yep. We didn't have
you
a lot of
know,
time. Yep. Right.
and there wasn't a lot of time.
Yep.
Um, uh, you know, how did you adjust with that? What were you able to do, or what could you do, or what made sense to do, given that you had to play again immediately the next day? And then maybe contrast with that with other times, maybe when you're not on the road, and the kinds of stuff that you practice now, maybe compared to the kinds of stuff that maybe you used to practice, or that you don't practice as much now.
What's funny about that is I think that one of the things that maybe you and I might have because we're a little older, maybe than people in their 20s and stuff, obviously, is that we have years of maybe being on the road. And being on the road, you kind of learn, you learn how to get your product that you're trying to create. That I call it resonance. You try to learn how to create a certain amount of resonance as much as you possibly can. I mean, Maynard was big on that. Even if he wasn't having a good day, the vibe of his energy was still there every night. Even if he was totally swollen and missing a bunch of notes, man, I really picked up on that more than maybe any other band. Woody Herman was like that too, but he was just much older. But Maynard for sure had that consistency of resonance where even if his chops weren't good, you still have a good time hearing him because you still got that idea of energy from him. And that
Mhm.
trade-off for the audience, it was really noticeable. So there's something about just remembering that's your focus and not worry so much about you want to be warmed up, but you want to make sure that you can just kind of, for that moment, any given day, you can just kind of resonate as much as you possibly can. I think it takes some of the heat off of making sure you've done your 15-hour warm up and your 2 hours of sit-ups and push-ups and 6 hours of meditation. And then you're ready to play a blues and your chops are done after 4 tunes. Um,
Oh, right, right,
guys that do that. And so,
right.
I think the trick is to learn who you are and how your body works. I'm just very fortunate that I recover quickly, and so I don't have to use a lot of the ointments and stuff like that. My body recovers fairly quickly, and so I'm very fortunate that way. But I think, like you said, I think just being goal. I think when we were younger, we were so much more goal oriented. We hadn't done anything yet, and
Mm.
so we were so focused on all the all the things we wanted to do, And so when you first get to New York, you have all these places you want to go, all the restaurants you want to go. Then after you've been here about 50 or 60 times, there's only maybe about 4 or 5 places you really want to go, and so the new people will say, "Let's go do this," and you're like, "It's something you don't have the energy to do it, but you've already done it," and so it's not high in your, so your energy is maybe based on your goal setting. And
Mm.
so if those aren't your goals and you have different goals, then maybe being in New York and riding the subway is not going to be something that's going to excite you. But to a first timer, hey, look, I'm strap hanging, and so they're very excited, but for us, we're like, woohoo, I'm going to go back and finish my word puzzle. Let me know when you're done. And so it's just different. I think, like, because I feel the same way. It's like if I don't have something I'm really dying to do, or a band I see that I really want to play with, or just something that I want to be able to do better or different, I can find it difficult to sit down and practice with any consistency as well. So sometimes you just warm up and go play. Sometimes you just do your basic maintenance, and that's it for the day. I think if you look at your lifetime like this, then you realize that any given day, you may not be able to give 100%. I think in trying to give 100%, you can maybe start going the wrong way, because you're not really giving the 100% to where you're going. You're giving 100% to where your mind is wandering to, which
I
maybe
see.
can be good in some. For a lead trumpet player, it's dangerous.
Yes. So you talked about goals. You
Mhm.
mentioned goals. You said um, maybe a goal that you have can sort of shape the intensity of your practicing.
I
Um,
think so. I feel like if you know, there's a couple times I have to, as a lead trumpet player, I don't, no one's really looking for me to be a true, like I always tell, we talked about this. It's like, name, like, let's say Johnny Audino is your favorite lead player, right?
mm,
Sing to me 8 bars of your favorite jazz solo of his that you transcribed. See what I'm saying?
right.
Snooki might be the other one, but like Roger Ingram, I love Roger, but he's not gonna, so he might blow a solo, but you might transcribe Freddie Hubbard. If you have an hour, your mind's probably going to go to Lee Morgan or more than Roger. But Roger might have played a great solo, but in the context of jazz soloists, you're probably not going to run to one of us for our solos. Other guys aside, like Walter White, fair enough. But a person that you acknowledge as being a lead player, that by the end of the gig, they're gonna play the high R. You're not gonna worry about it. It's not, even if it's like a half hour overtime or an hour overtime. You know how these gigs can go.
Yeah.
And there is a high R in the end. They're gonna hit the high R, and because that's their gig, is to make sure ta-da at the end happens, and they're good for it. So they might play a great solo but miss the high R in the end. Well, then that's not really what falls under the category of what you're just supposed to do as a lead player.
I see.
Lead
Yeah.
players, there's a certain consistency throughout the whole gig, even if the gig goes long, that you're still going to have enough energy and endurance to get through that gig, even if it goes longer than it's supposed to go. You know how it is. And so sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but that's kind of your job. So consequently, you're not going to really, so you're not going to focus on jazz improvising, right? For instance, right? And so, you wind up getting into a situation where, are you, nothing against Roger, but you're not gonna transcribe his solo. And so my goal might be, what, on the Dizzy Band tonight, I gotta blow on this tune, right? I gotta play on 4 bars or 6 bars, or 8, 12 bars of this thing. So what I want to do is just start figuring stuff out so I can play my 12-bar solo, because you're gonna get to maybe play that thing tonight. So maybe you work out an intro, maybe a little 4-bar thing or 2-bar thing you want to do at the beginning of that solo, and you kind of wing it the rest. But it's exciting because you're going to do that tonight. You know what I mean? Or you want to do it,
Mm,
you're going to do it tonight, tomorrow night, the next night. So it's exciting because there's a direct application to that, right?
right.
And so I think that the excitement comes from that, because your goal is immediate. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like, I want to be able to play this, because I'm tired of like not being able to play X, Y, or Z. So I'm just going to work something out for 2 bars and then see if how I can go from there. But I got to do it tonight. And so you kind of get into it. Whereas if someone said to, like, Johnny Audino, hey, just play some stuff and work it around, and do some 2/5s and just alter them around. He's gonna go, I don't even know that's mumbo jumbo. What does that even mean? You know what I mean? But
Mm.
I call it jazzer speak. Just mess around with it. That's, like, to me, that's jazzer speak. Because lead players, we're very focused on why we do what we do. And so if we don't have a way to, because in classical training, it can be, it's also a very focused way of going about it, right? You know, you practice this type of tonguing, you practice your K tonguing and your single tonguing, maybe you practice where the tip of your tongue goes, you do these things, and then you do this kind of thing, and then this thing, and it's not really as haphazard feeling is the wrong word, but it's much more defined what you do. And I think practicing to play the trumpet is much more defined what you're going to do and how much rest you might need. But I think when I talk to my friends that are jazz trumpet players, when they talk about their practice, I don't hear that same sense of, well, this lends to this and this goes to this. They kind of do a little of everything, and it kind of comes together, it seems like. I mean, you know better than I do. Does that seem like that's how it is? Because that's how it feels from our vantage point.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I practice rudiments and I practice long tones and I practice all that fundamental stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, I spend a significant amount of time working on playing particular lines or patterns in all keys,
Mm-hmm.
developing particular concepts. Like if there's a certain tonality that I'm starting to hear, it's starting to emerge. Then you know I will spend, you know, I'll spend a lot of time uh, you know, getting that together. Or if there's a tonality that I'm having a hard time, or a certain kind of chord change that I'm having a hard time navigating, I'll isolate whatever that is, and then I'll work on some exercises that, you know, that address that. You know, the approach that I use with my students also, it's like the approach that's in my book, How to Improvise Over Chord Changes, which is very systematic.
It scares me.
uh,
I need to make sure I get with you on that. It's coming.
but it's very systematic, and it's very, as a matter of fact, also it's practice this, and then once you can do this, then move on to this next thing.
Yep.
Then once you can do that, move on to this next thing, and
That's what I need. Yep.
you know, work it out at this tempo.
There we go.
You know, here are some fundamental things. Here's a different way to view certain fundamentals that, you know, are already known things.
Yep.
To, you know, add a little bit of freshness to the approach. But you know, I spend time developing and thinking of that kind of stuff in my practicing. You know, I recently finished my doctorate at University of Cincinnati,
Mm-hmm.
and that degree was a classical saxophone degree.
Oh, yeah.
And
You know what I mean? It's a very different kind of way of practicing.
yeah, it's totally different. I mean, you know, past sort of maintenance to make sure that my hands were feeling good. Lots of long tones, more long tones than I ordinarily would do. Completely different horn, completely different setup.
Yep.
Everything, the approach to it. Matter of fact, for much of the time that I was doing the doctorate, I played very little jazz alto during that time period, because that was the horn I was playing classical on.
Right.
And I was trying to draw a clear line between, this is how I'm going to approach classical, and this is how I'm going to approach the commercial playing, the jazz playing, you know. So yeah, I think I have a frame of reference, but I just think the physics of lead trumpet playing versus jazz trumpet playing are probably even more dramatically different than the difference between my embouchure in classical alto versus my jazz embouchure.
Or you can just take off your reed if you don't like, you take off your reed and break it. If I, you know,
right.
stuck with our reed. You know, it's a bad reed. Too bad. It's what you're using. You know, so
yeah, it's sort of like what I what I talk to about with singers. You know, so you know, I'm the minister of music at a church.
Yeah, sure.
And so I work with singers a lot. Also, there's a group at a commercial music ensemble that I started at Ohio State called the Ohio Show Band, which is, you know, singers and then the whole band. It's like a big, like, production. It's like a pop band, you know. And so I talk to singers and trying to give them advice about how to take care of their voice. You know, and my regular joke is, and say, well, you know, you need to take care of your voice because you can't just change your reed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So get your throat coat happening. Um, so how do you see yourself in the future? What goals do you have, and what sort of unfinished projects, um, or and maybe even uh, some personal growth, like some things that you are trying to develop in and grow in as a person, maybe stuff that's not even related to music.
Well, you and I talked about a little of this when we were talking in London. I think, I was talking to a friend of mine. We are talking about this period of time we're in, right? Where we're kind of at home and having to look at things, and people are saying, to each other, like you're asking, what do you want to do? Now you have a chance to kind of pause for a second. Everyone's in the same boat. You're not just sitting around being lazy. Everyone is forced to be in this situation.
Yeah.
And so, my wife definitely hears me talk about this more than recently than even the past 3 or 4 years. We've been married 10 years now. It's like as I get older, I think I get where they say that, you just want to start sharing some of what you know. And so I realized that for me, I'm a pragmatic person in a way. Maybe because Maynard said that, Frank Foster said that. My dad said he's the most pragmatic kid he's ever. So I'm kind of like, if this isn't, show me where I'm here and I want to be over there. You're the same way. We've talked about this. I'm over here and I want to be over there, right? So I don't know how to do it. So I need to find someone who's done it. That's it's pretty pragmatic right there. I'm not going to guess, like so many students we know guess what to do.
Mm.
And so if you can surround them. I was playing Jimmy Heath gig, and I won't say the two people that were there, but one guy is a saxophone player that's a trumpet player, and he wants to play high notes. And so the other guy there is a jazz player who you know both these people, and he says, "This is what Frank is thinking when he plays in the upper register." Right? I'm thinking, Frank's sitting 2 feet behind you, but that's just how people are. They don't go to the source, and so you have a person. You want to. I'm on this. I'm on the beach, but I want to be on that surfboard, right? Now, you can either go out and get drown and get into the waves and talking to the surfer, or you can just sit there until that surfer comes back, right? And that movie, The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, ever seen that movie?
Yeah.
Where
That's
the
a
guy
great
pulls
movie.
the Ferrari and he goes, "I got two questions. What do you do and how do you do it?" And I've always been like that. So it's like I don't have that strange, Tom Malone is very much like this. There's he more than anyone I've ever known. There's like zero impedance from an idea to trying to do it. It's like, hey, I want to play saxophone. Okay, I want to play great. That's why when I did the David Letterman show, we never really talked about that, but I got to play the 3 years with on the David Letterman show on TV, and that I can tell you about that. I'll tell you how quickly people say, "What was your audition?" My audition was Tom talking me through the opening because it didn't necessarily go left to right, and then the rest of it was your audition is you're on TV. Good luck. That was the audition. So I spent my first week. And they had me come back for one more week, and they said, "Okay, do you want the gig?" And so, of course, I said, "Well, let me ask my wife." And so Paul laughed, he said, "I think my wife said yes." But that's what it is. And so you can't really have too many hangups because if you're coming in, I'm a huge Zen of the martial arts. Is probably one of my favorite books. The book about Joe Hyman's talking to Bruce Lee. And if you come with too much baggage into a situation, you have to weed through all that ruckus and all that noise just to get to the front door when the pizza guy shows up. It's a drag. So if you can just get rid of all that impedance and you just sit there, and when the surfer comes in from his day of surfing, you go, how do you do that, and how can I do that? You know what I mean? Or how do you do that? Where did you learn? And that's it. It's so simple, and it's like I think that people think that it's got to be a lot harder, but a lot of times it's just that simple. And sometimes the answer doesn't work for you. Well, both my parents were surfers, and they've been taking me on a board since I was 6. Okay, that doesn't work for you. But there is a surfer out there that surfs great that probably can relate to your story if you just look for that. But instead of doing that, most students just guess what to do. And then so, I think I have a thing where I work with students where I tell them how addicted to assumption they are, which I think assumption is like poison. If you don't have to guess, then don't guess. There's too many people around with all the answers. You don't really have to guess. So where Tom Malone, if you look at his thing, coming back to this thing, he's got my thing was I played trumpet, piccolo trumpet, valve trombone, and flugelhorn. Those are my doubles. Tom Malone's doubles were tenor trombone, bass trombone, baritone sax, alto sax, tenor sax, clarinet, piccolo, the small piccolo, flute, alto flute, and I think one more. He had like 11 doubles, and he soloed on all those doubles.
Mm-hmm.
And it was talk about no impedance. So I asked him once. I said, what made you want to play this? He goes, well, I wanted to play in that band. I went, okay. He goes, well, they already had a trombone, so they needed a trumpet player, so I played trumpet. It's just like, it's incredible. It's like, of course that's what you would do, right? And so he got the horn out, figured out as much as he could. They went to someone who was really good and say, hey, how do I fix the rest of this? It just makes too much sense, doesn't it? But so I tell students how addicted to assumption they are, that I get them in a room and I say, okay, I want everyone to close your eyes and turn around. In my hand is a $20 bill, right? And so the band director is usually standing next to me. I say, the band director, Bob, let's say his name is going to watch where I put this, right? To make sure I don't just put it back in my pocket, right? And so I said, so I'll put this bill somewhere in the room, and the first person to figure out where it is gets to keep it, right? I'm figuring $20 is probably pretty good when you're a college student. You get maybe like one beer, but so I'll hide it somewhere close by, right? And then I'll walk to several other places in the room, right? And then I'll come back after I've hidden it, And so I say, no, okay, turn around, right? I just told them how addicted to assumption they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in the spirit of not having any kind of, I don't want to say it, but in a mean way, but any kind of a way to, any kind of using critical thinking skills, they go back to assumption. So here's a question for you. I say, okay, the first person to find the money gets to keep it, go. What do you think they typically do?
They just start walking around aimlessly,
And I
trying to
just
look
told
places.
them how addicted they are to assumption. And that's the first thing you do is go right back to assuming where they guess it, guessing where it might be. Because to me, guessing, I tell them, guessing is assumption, right? You don't know, you're guessing. I mean, levels of educated guesses, but fundamentally you're guessing, right? And so the last time I was there, I did what Carrie Dedman brought me out to a school in Chicago. And one of the girls, her name was Megan. I remember her name. Her name was Megan. Comes right up to me and says, "Can you tell me where the money is?" And I said, "Oh, it's right here." And so she took the money. I said, "Stop. Contest over." And I said to the students, I said, "This is what I mean. You're so addicted to assumption. You never stop to think, who in this room knows where the money is? Me and Carrie.
Right.
And you didn't. And the only person that come up and ask us was her. When I just told you that you're addicted to assumption." And so she took the money and she got to keep the money. And here's the thing, I still remember her name.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. It's like, it's so easy to stand out. And it's so easy to be, you don't have to work so hard. I feel like with what I'm seeing on the internet, you know how when they cook pasta in the old country, supposedly, or like cook pasta, to know when it's ready, they throw it at the refrigerator. You know that old story, that trick?
Mm.
If it sticks to the refrigerator, it's ready. So right. I feel like a refrigerator, I feel like when I turn on social media, I feel like it's like everyone's just like throwing, well, how about this, 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 versus like thinking about things a little bit more before they post it, or maybe not even posting it, but doing something else. Everyone's like got their amygdalas are on 10 and their frontal cortex is on 1. And so they're just like freaking out, just like throwing everything against the wall. And to a consumer like me or a potential customer, I hear about 2 seconds of things and I just turn it off. It might be great, but I'm just like, oh, here's more of that. And so, if you hear, you're going to hear Midnight Train to Georgia. It's going to be good, and you're going to listen to it.
Mm.
You don't have a person going, oh my God, turn that off. And I'm a trumpet player. I might turn that off, And so the reason I say that is that what I really want to get into now is to find a way to work with students one-on-one, or even in a large setting, where I can kind of point out that some of the reasons that people don't get to do the things they want to do is largely because of their subconscious mindset. And we've been programmed from various sources, so all various times, and a lot of it is who we're around, because they have the most input into our heads all the time, and it's going in. Our subconscious records everything, and so what they're hearing is guess, it's okay to guess, that's what I'm doing, guess. And so when I step in, I say, you're so addicted to guessing, you don't even realize how addicted. That's when they realize, oh my goodness, I'm that addicted to this. Like, I didn't even realize that he told me I was going to do it, I still did it. And so I find a lot of pleasure from working with students who have a set of mindsets or a set of thoughts that are not fundamentally working for them, and then giving them some different things to think about, like things like that, or maybe you say, well, if this plus this equals this, well, then what about that? Or like where I heard today was a good one, which she said, if you were to find yourself homeless right now, how long do you think you would stay homeless? And the answer was, the answer is probably not long, right? Because you could make a few phone calls and you wouldn't be homeless very long, would you? He said,
No.
so what if a really super successful person that is successful in a way that you're not yet successful landed in your situation? How long would it be before they're back doing that?
Ah, yeah, that's
And
a
it's
good
kind of that's
point.
kind of what I mean. It's like how long would it be before they're back? So is it really how the other half lives? Is it well that's for these people, or is it really that because there's so much information that proves that it's not true? Because if you look around, you really look, successful people. I don't necessarily mean money, like we said. Successful people are all around us, but the problem is, young people talk to each other. When you play a recital, they don't come to it; they come to their friends' recitals. And so instead of being able to hear how it's supposed to go, they hear what maybe hopefully will maybe be good one day, maybe if they're lucky, probably. Versus you play with the Count Basie band, so you definitely know something I don't know. Nope, I'll just go talk to my friend because it's just they don't even maybe realize they're doing it. They're just addicted to it, so that just is a natural way to go. It's harmful, it doesn't work, but it's just so locked into their subconscious. They don't even realize they're not going to your concert. The idea of going to your concert doesn't even resonate with them because they're listening to another voice that's telling them to go over here instead of to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I was talking to, well, I'm interviewing Victor Wooten tomorrow night,
Oh, Victor's, yeah, he's a great guy, right? I love that dude.
and we had some really great conversations. And as often as I can, anytime he's doing a master class
Hmm.
or anything else, I
Yep.
always try to go check it out. And I've watched hours and hours and hours of videos on YouTube and stuff because he just has a particular perspective that I think is missing. Um, and one of the things he talks about is the fact that uh, it's like the way that we socialize and educate it's like all wrong because what we do is we put people that are at the same level all together,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is that's not how we learn the language, like whatever native language we learn,
Yep. Yep.
because we're around people that are experts, our parents,
Mm-hmm.
and they're speaking the language. They're saying all kinds of stuff, and they're not dumbing it down because we won't understand it.
Yep.
They're just saying what they're saying.
Yep.
And because they have such a better mastery of the language, we grow very quickly. We
Well,
learn
without
those
even real
language very
awareness of it,
quickly.
right? We just are just, what's funny is the old essay that's like before. It's like if you run and train hard, you'll run fast. But if you put all those books away on the tapes and you just chase after Usain Bolt, you may never catch him. But the more you do that, I can almost guarantee you'll outrun everyone else.
Hmm.
It's the same kind of thing. It's like, one thing I will say, when I was in North Texas, I was lucky enough to I was lazy, so I didn't want to have to try to work out how to get my practice room times or this practice room. So I decided to find a practice space there where no one would want to go to. So I went to the South Practice Building on the top floor, and you had to walk to the top floor. And I realized that I could have that room all to myself for the whole semester because nobody wanted to go and walk that far out of the way from the music building to go practice. So my second or third day there, I heard this trumpet player in the room next to me. His name is Dan Smith. He's in the military now, but you should have heard this guy. It's like you're talking about. He was like, I thought he looked really young too. I thought if this is the level, he's a classical player, but I thought if this is the level, and he looks like he's about 20. He's about 26 at the time. If this is the level you have to play at to do well here, I'm going to go home because. So it turns out he was probably one of the top two out of almost total 300 trumpet players. He's one of the top two or three guys at the school. But he had the same thought I did, which is I don't want to have to worry about practicing when I want to. I want to go whatever I want to, so I'll just practice here because nobody wants to go here. So we had the same thought without knowing it. So I practiced next to him for every day for 2 years, and so I practiced 4 or 5 hours a day next to him when I was in college my first year. And so it's like you said, I got to hear what really good sounded like every day. And also, he didn't play bad, so I feel good about myself. He played good. I felt bad about myself pretty much every day. But like you said, if you're willing to feel bad about yourself for a moment, you can get better. But if you need to always feel good about where you're at, you won't grow. And that's something we both know. You won't grow. You have to be pushed or pulled.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that's missing. I think people are afraid to say to students for various reasons. Look, if I tell my student, look, Sergei Nikiriakov told a student at NYU he'd be embarrassed if he played like her.
Mm,
And so what do? You get a letter from the parents saying, I can't believe you said that to my daughter. It's like, look, if your daughter wants to play music, she's going to hear way worse than this. So,
right,
and
right.
listen to Sergei Nikirakov play, and you realize he's not being mean. He's being honest. And you're going to try to get someone to spend $1 on you versus spending $1 on something else. Then you better resonate something that they're going to want to spend that dollar on, or you can't make a living. I mean, quite literally, you can't make a living. You better resonate something that's going to want to get them to spend. Like on Amazon, if you like this, you'll probably like that. So they better like that thing that's in addition to the thing that they normally buy, or else you can't, quite literally, you can't make a living.
Yeah.
People miss that part, so they have to go to you. You shred them on giant steps. I have to go to you if I'm ever going to play giant steps. Well, if I listen to my friend who plays about as good as I do, I'm never going to be as good as a person who plays with the bassy band, if that's a goal of mine. You know what I mean?
Right.
I better be able to talk to you about, hey man, how do I do that? I suck. How do I unsuck? And my friend's not going to tell me how to do that. You will. But so what's the disconnect? There's a question for you. What's the disconnect? Is because they know they can go to their parents and you can get in trouble, or I can get in trouble because we told them they weren't perfect. And it's like, well, your son's not in the the New York City Ballet because A, he's not very good, and B, he's 6. It's like, what am I going to tell you? You have a 6-year-old. He's not even old enough to be in the ballet, and you're freaking out about why he's not in the ballet. Is that an issue? People were afraid of repercussions maybe we're dealing with, because I feel like that might cause harm without meaning to.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely that whole kind of old school approach that's really kind of rough around the edges, where you're just telling students the truth.
Yeah.
You know, um, there's not as many teachers that are willing to still go in, and even the teachers that are willing to go in, you have to find a nuanced approach to that. Um,
Oh, so it's changed a bit, because in North Texas, that Jim Riggs just told me I suck. He goes, "You suck. Listen to these records." I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that there's still teachers. I mean, I've had to kick students out of lessons, or
Mm-hmm.
had to have heart to heart with the student, saying, "Hey, man, do you even want to be doing this?"
Yeah.
There's too many saxophone players that can play than to be dealing with this. So I've had those conversations. I don't know that I've ever had to tell a student that they suck, but I think it was implied.
Well, no, he knew I could take that. He knew that
Yeah.
wasn't going to break me. It was just kind of cold water in your face. It's like, look, you could say, well, you're not as good as you think you are, and that wouldn't have had the effect. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you have
I
to know your
suck. Oh,
students.
you suck. Here's a solution.
Yeah, I mean, you have to know your students, and you have to have earned the trust of the students to be able to say certain things.
Right.
And I think there's some wisdom in figuring out when that is, just from the teacher's perspective. But I think in general, I think there's not enough teachers that are willing to really tell their students the truth,
Right.
and say stuff that sounds hard, but may actually end up being the thing that caused them to actually get serious,
Right.
or is the thing that caused them to say, "Hey, music is not for me. I really need to be, in the engineering school." You
And if
know,
they resonate at a higher level there, then maybe there's something to that. You know.
yeah,
That, you can still love music. There's a love of music, and performing it for a living are two different things. Sometimes they're two different things, aren't they?
right, right.
I ain't in love with this, but we're doing it.
So, is there anything that you'd like to mention that I haven't asked you about? Maybe something that you have upcoming. I mean, so much stuff has been
Oh,
canceled and put on pause.
everyone's suffering the loss of work and lots of extra work, and so it's like, at what point do we start talking about the gigs that we're supposed to do that we lost? I mean, the big one that I really am sad about is they had to cancel Jimmy Heath's memorial. It was supposed to be on the 12th
Yeah.
of March, and so to me that was a big one. I mean, it wasn't even a gig that was going to pay any money, but come on, I mean, Mr. Heath has given us so much, we still owe him, So
Yeah.
that was hard.
All right. Well, Frank Greene, thank you so much for your time, and
Yeah, my pleasure.
I appreciate your perspective on things and your generosity, your willingness to share real information with the listeners. So,
Thank
God
you.
bless you. Stay safe. What is it? Stay inside,
Yeah,
or
stay inside.
whatever.
When we get a chance, we got to go hit that veggie burger again there at the Hard Rock in London.
Oh
Who
yeah,
knew that was the thing, you know?
yeah. That was what was happening. All right, man. Well, God bless you, and I will see you later.
All right, have a good night.
All right now.
Bye, y'all.